Many perceptions going into this budget, so let's just start with why it's so important to keep our eyes on this budget.
All right, good afternoon, Natasha. Well, I think it's very important to just draw a distinction between the two budgets that we see yearly. You're quite rightly saying moments ago that in February you have what we call an allocation budget where funds are allocated to specific departments. We also see taxes being announced in the February budget. Not so the case in this particular medium-term budget policy statement. What happens here is that you have a review of the 6 months that have passed, and we take a look to see 3 months, or rather 3 years ahead, whether or not the country is on a correct fiscal path, whether we are managing our finances to meet the expectations 3 years from now. So that's the difference between the two budgets that you have. So today you're likely to hear numbers of reviews, rather, of the growth figures that we are likely to see. Remember that the Treasury at one point in February this year said that the country or the economy is likely to grow at 1.3%. Many of the other institutions have dropped that to around 0.5%, and as I've said before through these crossings, that 0.5% is not nearly enough to create the jobs. We are also likely to hear numbers around the budget deficit, which is chiefly the difference between the money we collect in tax revenue and that which we spend. So all of those numbers are likely to go through a review process here in this midterm budget.
Absolutely. And then, Devan, of course, it is the minister's maiden budget, and with everything that's been going on, there must be plenty at stake for him in this budget.
Oh yes, indeed, and I think it was quite succinctly said in some of the inserts you played earlier that we really have a credibility issue here. Rightly or wrongly, we take a look back 6 months ago when the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, was installed as the new Finance Minister under those circumstances of an abrupt cabinet reshuffle. Those circumstances still linger. The Finance Minister now has to address the fiscal consequences of a weak economy, but he has to do this under the backdrop of a rather solid track record of those before him. Also remember, the Treasury as an institution has ranked up a very good and reputable stance or reputation internationally as being an institution with predictability, with transparency. So Malusi Gigaba now not only has to talk about the nuts and bolts of a weak economy, but he also has to address this underlying credibility issue. The credibility, of course, is directly linked to how investors see him and what the confidence levels are like in the country. If he shows or secures some sort of credibility that he's serious about the economy and there is transparency, you are likely to see that confidence level boost up a bit. So we'll find out exactly what that tone is later this afternoon.
And then finally, Devan, I suppose also linked to all that, all those issues of credibility is how he is going to tackle the issue of state-owned enterprises in the lead-up to this budget. SOEs have been repeatedly flagged. What are we expecting to hear on that front?
Well, let's take a look at it. I mean, you have state-owned enterprises ranking up guarantees against the government of about 480 billion rand, 350 billion rand of guarantees valued against Eskom, and then as you go down you have SAA there as well. Now, the government simply cannot afford to have a situation where all of those guarantees are called up. If they are, it has a detrimental effect on our fiscus. So what the Finance Minister does now with South African Airways, they need about 10 billion rand to get going, and where he gets the money from is going to be the focus this afternoon. We've heard previously that there was a possibility of government selling its telecom shares, using that money to plough into SAA. Subsequently, we've heard that that might not be on the cards. So is it about selling some state assets to get the money? And if he does get the money for these ailing state-owned enterprises, what will he do to ensure that those state-owned enterprises operate with efficiency, operate with good governance? That's the type of information that this medium-term budget is hoping to sort of reflect, and that's what the experts and the analysts want to get out of this budget and take away from the statement this afternoon.
Devan, for now, thank you very much. We'll leave it there. Our Devan Murugan live from Parliament, and of course we will get more from him ahead of today's budget.